Well, I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, Charlie Cutler, and I am not going to do the usual thing and say lots of nice flowery things about him, because you could pull that right off the internet, and time is of the essence. I'm going to use the time for introduction to make a commercial for his amazing company, Church West Insurance. I have been working with Charlie and his associates, Tom and Kristen, for many years on the Thousand Pines board, on the Abco Flash board of directors. I served there for a few years. My experience as a pastor, we had an air conditioning unit, two air conditioning units stolen. These were industrial size. People do this for the copper. They take them out. That was $40,000, and we could not do without the AC if we wanted to keep people in the seats. I mean, my preaching was okay, but not as good as the air conditioning as far as a draw. Look, he cut through the nonsense and got us to get reimbursed fast. And as I recall, I think it was even in full. I have churches that call on a number of issues, and although we have an attorney we can go to at our disposal with the region, they see it all, and their attorneys work with a lot of different churches. They've got great resources. It's not all about the Benjamins and saving dough and making money for this company and for Charlie. We got some advice for a church that was talking about a Boy Scout charter. And the Boy Scouts, that's not such an easy thing to decide anymore, whether you're going to have the Boy Scouts do a charter in your church because of lawsuits that have gone on and bankruptcies. And it hasn't affected American Baptists so much as, say, the Methodists. But where the advice could have been from Charlie, don't do it, it's too risky, avoid risk at all costs. No, it was the benefits of ministry was worth the reward. And I just will finish with that to tell you that their heart is in ministry just as much as you and I are. So with that, Charlie, take it away.
Thank you for having me on. And yes, when you called or when you emailed me saying, hey, should we do this Boy Scouts thing? And I was like, oh, I love that, because Boy Scouts can be a really impactful ministry, or it can be a disaster. But if it's going to be a ministry of yours, we want to come alongside you and say, hey, this is the right way to do it. And we don't want to just say no. So we are very ministry focused. That's our role, is to come alongside you in any way that we can. And I appreciate being invited to this today. It's about a new law, and it's a law that came into effect January 1st. And a lot of it came into play due to the bankruptcy of Boy Scouts of America and the abuse claims that happened. And I could hear, we had a Zoom on it a while ago, and Pastor Andy, you were on that Zoom call, and I could hear you groaning through the chat as you were looking at this going, oh, what is this? And everybody's got to do this. And sometimes we want to give you good news a lot of the time, when it's like, hey, you could do this ministry and do it. But in a lot of ways, we're giving you some tough news, because there's laws that have changed. And I want to be real direct. I want to be able to answer all the questions that you guys have. And so I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation that talks about the 3 new requirements of this law in California. You'll receive a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to give you guidance and resources on each of the 3 areas, step by step, and then a model policy that will meet the new laws in California. And these are the new requirements in the bill, is Assembly Bill 506, and new requirements for ministries in California. If you look, this is our team. I've got a fantastic team that we work with. Andy, you work with Kristen, right? Here's Kristen. I don't know if she's come out there. She's met with you before, but you can see one of the people that you probably work with on our team on this website. So I'm really fortunate to have this group of people behind me, and they're very well versed on this as well. So, all right. Richard Hammer wrote the Church Law and Tax Report, wrote church tax or pastor tax and law. I mean, he's the guy that the IRS goes to when they have questions. He's the guy that the Supreme Court goes to when they have questions. He tracks the reasons why ministries end up in court. And he has for year after year after year, and he used to chart it. He used to say, this is what it was this year and this year and this year. And the number one thing year after year after year was sexual abuse of a minor. And churches haven't done a good job of it, preventing it. And there's the Boy Scouts of America, they didn't do a good job of it. And the folks in Sacramento, they've decided that they were going to pass legislation, and they're going to say there are certain things that you're going to have to do that are very specific. And what's new for us in the church world is that for years, because of the First Amendment, we've had this freedom of religion and or freedom of practice of religion, and we still have that in the sanctuary. However, in California, what they've said is they said, you know, we're not going to interfere with the way that you worship. Forget about pandemic and executive orders and things like that. But I'm saying, you know, regular church, they're not going to tell you how you're going to practice in the sanctuary. However, if you're going to have youth activities, if you're going to send your kids to camp, if you're going to have beach days, if you're going to have Sunday school classes, if you're going to have sleepovers, and if that is part of your church activity, AB506 is something that you're going to have to follow. And it's three main components of it. Okay, the first thing that they do is they define what is a youth service organization. And again, it's the first time that the Business and Professions Code actually specifically says something that relates to churches. In the past, it's only been if you've opened up a preschool or a cafe or sometimes a camp that Business and Professions Code would apply to religious organizations. But for the first time ever, churches are now in the Business and Professions Code if they have youth service organizations, and they've defined the youth service organization as really it's, and I'll just go through the code quickly. It just says youth service organization means an organization that employs or utilizes the services of persons who, due to their relationship with the organization, are mandated reporters. Well, mandated reporters are pastors, people that serve youth, administrators or employees of a public or private youth center, youth recreation program, or youth organization. And we've checked with the Department of Justice. We've checked with the state assembly that in their intent of the definition of a youth organization, does that include churches? And they've definitively said, yes, churches are a youth organization, unless you don't have any kids there. You're not a youth organization. But if they're 18 and over, I'm sorry, under 18, and they're coming to church and you have church activities, you're a youth organization. Okay? So it applies to you. The questions that we've received is they've said, well, does this apply to a school? Well, schools have their own Business and Professions Code that applies to them. Preschools and daycares, they have their own Business and Professions Code that applies to them. Camps have their own Business and Professions Code that is being worked through right now, and it'll be coming out in the next probably 90 days as far as what they're going to have to do. So in the meantime, they're a youth service organization. You know, denominational offices, I believe, because you oversee people that are working with youth, because you have youth activities, we have, you know, times that I feel like denominational offices are in this category as well. And the only time would be if you have churches without anybody under the age of 18, would be the time you're not a youth service organization. Okay. Okay, so the requirements, and I want to get into these. The number one thing that's a little bit challenging is that you now have training. And the law says that an administrator, employee, or regular volunteer of a youth service organization must complete training in child abuse and neglect identification and child and abuse and neglect reporting. So I'll get into what the definition of a regular volunteer is in just a moment, but it's your youth volunteers. But right now, it's your administrators, and administrators in California does include your board of directors. And so your board of directors should be aware of this and aware of this training and the requirement. And the training in California, it's on identification and reporting, how we're supposed to be handling it. And I will tell you, from an insurance agency that works with over 4,000 ministries in California, when we've had claims, ministries haven't done the best job of responding to them. You know, we want to care for these families. We want to investigate it and see, you know, we've seen the attention that other organizations have received. We want to see if there's validity here. And I'll tell you, we haven't done a good job. We've increased liability. We haven't done, I think that this training is good, is what I'm saying. And so the training is specific about identifying abuse, identifying neglect, reporting abuse, reporting neglect, and how you specifically have to do it. This can be fulfilled, the training, so who it should include: administrators, managers, whoever's in charge of HR, all employees. And all employees means all employees. It doesn't matter if they're a custodian. It doesn't matter if they work in the choir, that they never have any interaction with youth. The law specifically says all employees must go through this training. Part-time, seasonal, doesn't matter. We have guidance on our website about the definition of who's an employee versus independent contractor and things like that. If you need help with that, we can help you out. But it's very clear, if you're paying somebody, they're an employee, they should go through this training. I will tell you our experience. We deal with probably on more than weekly, or around weekly, we deal with some sort of abuse situation. It's not that they're happening in church. It's that churches are being made aware of abuse situations. And the abuse might be in the home. It might be somewhere at camp. I mean, almost weekly basis at camp, somebody comes forward and they report that they're suffering abuse. It's a child that's going through abuse. And the church is the one that's sitting there saying, how should we handle it? But more and more often, the abuse situations are coming outside of youth ministry. It's somebody that's involved in their audiovisual team, or on an athletics program or something like that. So I think it's important that we recognize that this training that all employees should go through is, I think, beneficial. And then I think it's good that we have this clarification on a regular volunteer. It doesn't mean every volunteer needs to go through the training, but the regular volunteer is somebody that does supervise youth activities. So all of the folks in your Sunday school, people that are supervising kids, should be going through this training as well. Okay. The training is available for free. The website is at mandatedreporterca.com. People can go through it. It says 6 hours for clergy. It's actually 6 hours for clergy, 4 hours for employees, 2 hours for volunteers. I've gone through all of the training, and it can be done in about half that amount of time. If people are, and it's free, you direct them there, and I've got a link here. There's a link on our website for mandatedreporterca.com on where to get that training. You can also get it done if anybody subscribes to churchrnetwork.com. They do it. It's 90 minutes. I think it's better. There's a little bit. There's an administrator's module that you can assign it out to everybody. I think one of the challenges people are going to have here is going and assigning out training to everybody and making sure that people have gone through the training. But you can go to one of those 2 pages for it. Okay. Any questions on this? Nope. All right.
I have a question.
So, yes.
Do we have any training in Spanish or translated to Spanish?
The training at mandatedreporterca.com is in Spanish and English and Korean and a few other languages.
All right. Thank you.
The training, and that's provided by the state, and Church HR Network at this point is English only.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. The next one is the background check. To me, this is the most difficult thing, especially getting set up. You know, the training, you know, churches have gone through training to protect you. Now it's specific training. So I think that's a pretty easy one to tackle. The tough one is the background check requirement. And the law is now stating that the online background checks that we've used in the past are not going to meet the requirement for screening youth workers any longer. So it must include a fingerprint check, and the fingerprint check is through LiveScan. It is difficult to get signed up, and I'll go into that in just a minute. But that's the key thing, and this is what the law says. It says, shall include the applicant's fingerprints. A fee shall not be charged to a not-for-profit organization, so the fee has been waived now for California. But it's going to go to the Department of Justice, and then you can upgrade it just a little bit and go from Department of Justice and pay for an FBI check, which is $15. The larger ministries have been doing this for years. They've bought their own LiveScan machine, so somebody can actually go to a church and they'll run their fingerprints. I know Thousand Pines is buying a machine right now so that they can have all of their camp counselors just run their fingerprint. It takes a couple of days to maybe a couple of weeks. It does the California Department of Justice, and they also run it through the FBI. The free part is the California Department of Justice one. And the legislation passed the law so that that fee is waived for running the background check. For the FBI, the check is actually, I thought I had it up here, the fees, but we have a guide for it, and I'll send all of that to you. For the FBI, the check is $15. I'll tell you the nice thing about it is that it's one and done. Once you have somebody that's a youth worker, you say, hey, Andy, you're going to come and be a regular volunteer at the church. You've gotten to know you. You've been here for a while. We're going to have you go get a background check. You can either buy your own machine, which is expensive. It's a few $1,000s. I don't think I would do that for most ministries. It makes sense for a camp, but not for most ministries. But I would say, okay, Andy, I'm going to have you go down to the local UPS store. And when you go to the local UPS store, you're going to bring this form with you that says that, my church is asking Andy to be a volunteer. And Andy, I need you to do this background check. And I'm going to receive a report of what Andy's background history is, what his criminal background is. And I'm going to say it's shaky, but we'll approve you, Andy. But then if he goes out and he commits another crime 3 months later, I'm going to be notified. And that's what's nice about this LiveScan report. It's going to keep his fingerprints on record, and it will notify me if something happens later on. So it's one and done. The other background check companies, they're really upset about it. There's really the online background check companies are out of business in California. So this is where you need to go. I kind of came up with some of the common questions that we've run into. Some people have said, hey, if somebody refuses to get a background check, which we've had that happen, they can still come to church. They can still volunteer in, ministry activities, just not youth ministry activities. Do all volunteers need to have a background check? Not all of them. Really, it's the ones that work with youth. When it says which employees need a LiveScan, all employees need a LiveScan. Ministries that have had preschools in the past, they've been used to this because all employees involved in the preschool needed a LiveScan. But now all church employees need a LiveScan. The volunteers that work with youth need it. Board members, they're administrators of the organization. They now, if they're overseeing people that work with youth, which they do as a board, and you're providing that governing oversight, I think it could be interpreted that board members should be live scanned as well. I think that you might want to look at the law and determine, that one yourself. I think it's a good idea. But we're finding this in all youth service organizations that we're going to have to start doing a little higher level screening of folks. Now, if you've already done a background check and you've done an online background check, you will need to do a new live scan check. And then you do the state one. Some people say you can also do the online ones that you've been doing, but the most important thing is that you get a live scan done. You can do as many background checks as you want. I think the one required by law is the minimum you should be doing. Some people have like if you're an AYSO coach or you are volunteering for another organization, you would have to have a live scan report for each organization that you're a part of. And so they're really not transferable. So somebody could come forward and I could say, hey, Andy, I need you to do a live scan so you can come volunteer with the youth. And you'd say, oh, don't worry, I already have a live scan done because I'm a teacher. And I'd say, well, Andy, you've got to also have that live scan record tied to me so that when you go rob a bank someday and you get caught, the school is going to be notified and the church is going to be notified that you've done that. And then some denominations have said, hey, we want to start running live scans for every church. We checked with the DOJ if you could do something like that, and you're not able to. So each ministry is their own youth serving organization, and each ministry should be doing these checks. Here's the fees. So you go through an application process, and Andy, I'll send the link to you and you can send it out to everybody or post it on the website. It's at churchwest.com/AB506 is the website. And there's a guide specifically on how to go through and become an applicant agency so that I can be authorized to run a background check on Andy. Because I've got to say, hey, I'm just not some random guy just running background checks on people. I've got to say, I'm an organization that has a reason why I need to start running background checks, and I become an applicant agency. The fees, like I said, it's waived for volunteers. There is a fee for employees of $32. The federal check, there's some fees for that. And then the subsequent arrest notice, that's the one that I think is just so brilliant. It's just so handy because you can, as long as Andy's involved in my church and he's volunteering on behalf of the church, I'll just be notified if something ever comes up. And so you don't have to worry about it as much anymore. And then the fingerprint rolling fee, there's some counties in Northern California where they do it for free, but in Southern California, you typically have to pay about $15. But what I'm sending Andy has a PDF where you'll be able to click on this link right here, and it'll take you right to where you can look and see LA County, and you can sort and see how much the fees are, and you can find the $15 fingerprint fee in your area. So any questions on LiveScan?
I'm not too familiar with all this. It's all new to me. So is it background check different from LiveScan?
Okay, let me put it this way. Background check is that's a criminal background check, and I'm using the terms interchangeably. But a criminal background check is something that you would do when you're just looking at somebody's criminal record. LiveScan is the specific background check that you need to do. And LiveScan is the one where you're going to the Department of Justice in California, or you're going to the FBI. And that's where you're doing those background checks. The ones that no longer work and no longer meet the law in California is some people do it through their payroll company. Other companies will be like Ministry Safe is a background check company, or Checker is a background check company.
Okay.
There's nothing preventing you from doing them anymore, but you have to do LiveScan.
Okay, so you don't really need the background check anymore if you have the LiveScan.
And LiveScan is the type of background check that you need to do.
Okay, I thought
now, what's your
two separate. I work with youth, and in our church we did the background check, but we haven't gone to the extent of doing the live scan yet.
There's quite a few. There's like Protect by Ministry. There's
I think
and
that,
there's
that's
good
the
people.
one.
They've done.
Protected by
And
ministry,
you
yeah.
can still do that.
Mhm.
You can still do that. Nothing's preventing you from doing that. But in order to meet the law, you need to do LiveScan as your background check. It's not a company. It's a Department of Justice background check that's going to be replacing the existing background check that you're doing.
Okay, got it. I just
Okay.
wanted to see if we need to do both or just the live scan, but you made it clear
You
now.
can, just
too.
LiveScan is fine. Mhm.
Okay,
You can do both. I don't want to tell you no. You know, I don't want to. There's probably something that they may pick up that others don't. I think the most important thing is that you do the background check that meets the law, because that's the standard of care that's
okay,
being set for youth serving organizations and ministries in California.
okay. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
I also have a question.
Charlie.
Charlie.
I have a question.
Uh,
Yes.
You mentioned that you could go to a UPS store to get the live scan done. Are there other places that people can go to as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of different background check providers and or the live scan providers. These are the people that will be doing the fingerprint rolling for you, and they have to go through a credentialing process so that they're authorized to run FBI and Department of Justice background checks. And frequently it's the UPS store. There's other background check people that will provide services. Sometimes you can find somebody that will come to the church and they'll bring their machine with them and they'll run the background checks for everybody at your church. The harder part, and let me just say something. I think the hardest part about all of this is becoming an authorized applicant agency. And we have a guide on our website, how you go through the LiveScan process. And I will tell you, the only way to really learn it is to fill out the forms and go through the process, because it is challenging. It takes some time.
All right, thank you.
This is
wait,
William
I
Campbell.
have
I'm
a-
on board.
Yes, go ahead.
If persons have gone through LiveScan in conjunction with other agencies, and is there any time limit for its effectiveness?
Well, they would have to go through a background check for your ministry specifically. They would have to have their background check tied to your organization as a youth service organization. And the law was actually effective January 1st of this year. So they would need to do a live scan specifically for your ministry.
Yeah, Charlie, a clarifying question, if I may. This is Carlos Cabrera from Portola Baptist Church in San Francisco. The question, Charlie, is this, and I'm sure everyone may have the same question. It's about the regular volunteer. Because of what I read on your slide deck there, it says that that in order, you know, the definition of the regular volunteer, it says for those that work for more than 16 hours per month, or help for 16 hours per month, or 32 hours per year. That's about half an hour, you know, every Sunday, right? And we have services on Sunday. So is it fair, Charlie, to say that most likely this new requirement impacts almost everyone, right? And we have people helping, you know, with kids and youth and so forth, and I'm sure everyone does more than 30 minutes, you know, every Sunday. So is that a fair statement, Charlie?
Yes, sir. If they're working with youth, they should be going through the training and they should be going through the background check process. And you know, they're going to get to that 16 hours, or they're going to get to that 32 hours eventually. And I think we want to do that in our church. We want to make sure that people aren't gaining easy access to the children, and we want to screen them. And these are people that are supervising youth. I'm not saying that if somebody's going to be coming to church and sitting in the sanctuary on Sunday and there's going to be kids present, that they need to have a background check. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that if somebody is going to be supervising the kids in our ministries, that they need to have these background checks done.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Pastor Carlos. Okay. And this is, I think, key. A lot of us have had templates in the past or programs that we've developed and policies and procedures to protect youth in our ministries. And now there's some specific requirements in the law that says this is what we need to be doing. And so you need to have both of the following included in your child protection program. And I will tell you that on our website, there's a specific resource and there's a model child protection policy that you can utilize and implement at your church that will meet all of these requirements. And it'll have these policies and procedures in there. So what it is, it says I know we can all read, but I'm going to read it anyway, so it's on the screen here. But it says a youth service organization shall develop and implement child abuse prevention policies and procedures, including but not limited to both of the following. So we have to have these two things. One is policies to ensure the reporting of suspected incidents of child abuse to persons or entities outside of the organization. And that's key. And that's where I don't think churches have done a good job of this. I've got one ministry that we're working with now where it was a pastor's son that was abusing another minor child. And I mean, what a position that the church was in. And it was, then they were looking at it and they were saying, well, it's a minor, and they were trying to, abuse happened, and they were trying to handle it internally, and it was a bad situation. Well, guys, the law now says if you have a reasonable suspicion that abuse occurred, you need to report it to somebody else. They need to do the investigation, and they need to handle it. And you need to be there to pick up the pieces, because that's what the church does. We're going to minister to the families afterwards, and we're going to do a lot of things, but we're not in the position to be investigating the abuse. And so we're going to report it to an entity outside of the organization. And there's specific training on that, and that's available on the website. And I'll have the link that Pastor Andy will be able to send to you. And the other thing, and this is something where you've got to have a judgment call on how this is going to work at your ministry, but it says policies requiring, to the greatest extent possible, the presence of at least 2 mandated reporters whenever administrators, employees, or volunteers are in contact with or supervising children. So we've had in the past the 2-adult rule. We've also had in the past the never alone rule, that you're never alone with a child, that if you're with a child, you've got more than one child with you. You have multiple kids there. Well, the law now says it doesn't matter how many kids that are there. There's got to be at least 2 adults present. Our recommendation is that they're unrelated adults. We have had abuse claims, and it's hard to have a spouse or a father-daughter or father-son, mother-daughter relationship that looks unbiased. You need to have 2 unrelated adults that are supervising. And so the gray area in the law here says to the greatest extent possible, and your ministry is going to need to make that decision, what the greatest extent possible to having the presence of at least 2 mandated reporters means. So I think that for ministries, we just need to get in the habit of planning activities when we have 2 adults in all of the rooms. Okay. On our website, I have replays where I've interviewed an attorney. We have an HR consultant. It's on the website. And so we have 2 webinars that you can go through to watch on demand. We have Church HR Network that they have, all that you need to know about LiveScan. We've got that sample child protection policy, and I've got contact information for attorneys that can help you out if you need help with it. Model policies, we have it all there for you. So it's there. The 3 things. So just to narrow it all down, I know I've been kind of going on for a while. I wish I could just make it because it sounds really simple, but we can just dumb it down and say, we've got to have training, we've got to have screening, we've got to have policies and procedures. There's some nuance to it, but those are the three things that we must do. What these do for the training for abuse and identification, screening for all of your employees and all volunteers have to have a LiveScan background check, and the policies and procedures, we have to have written protocols for reporting abuse outside. If you look at these things, it's now the law as far as the baseline level of protection that we should be providing for youth. But I think that it's important that you not just take the template and say, okay, we're going to insert church name here and not really look at it. I think that you need to look at it and get some help with it and implement it at your ministry and make it part of your youth ministry. And I think it's also good to look at what Church Law and Tax Report has put out as far as the entire program. It really should be 14 steps. We don't want to just say, once we've run our background check and once we've had them go through the training and now that we have policies and procedures, we can have these people working with you. No, the first thing we need to do is I need to look at Andy and say, Andy, why do you want to work with youth? Are you qualified for it? Are you, we need to interview this person. We should have an application. We should be doing reference checks. The 6-month rule, making sure that they're part of the ministry and involved with your ministry for 6 months prior to, having them work with youth. I was on a call earlier today with the ministry that I work with in Watts, and they had a guy that showed up that was really looking to volunteer and serve, and great, gregarious guy, and they found out that he's under investigation for abuse right now. And this is an organization that is starving for volunteers. Well, before you allow that person to access your youth, we want to make sure that they're part of your ministry for 6 months, that they've gone through a new member class, that they've volunteered in other areas, something like that. But Richard Hammer also says we should be benchmarking the policies against your peers. The one that we've provided, I think, is a good benchmark. If you implement this policy and you want it reviewed by legal counsel, you can send it to us. And it doesn't matter if you're insured with us or not. Our attorneys will review it for you for free and give you, because you're going to customize it to your ministry, but it's the insurance company attorneys at Brotherhood Mutual. They'll run through they'll look through it and they'll say, hey, this is meeting the standard of care. I think it's good to look at it every year or two. The 2-adult policy, background checks. So this is kind of the overview of everything that I think that Church Law and Tax Report Richard Hammer has put out, saying that this is what you should be doing. It's kind of the comprehensive plan. And then that's everything.
Charlie, the question is, based on some of the material that I read, there is no agency enforcing or in charge of compliance, right? So my question to you is, the law came into effect 1/1/2022. So is there any liability in the sense, any penalties coming from any state agency if this law has not been fully, let's say, followed by, let's say, by churches like us out there?
They didn't put together an enforcement entity other than the insurance companies. And I will tell you something, and what it says in the law, it says that insurance companies can check to make sure that you're compliant with these things. And the secret that isn't a secret is that the insurance companies have always been asking these things. They've always been asking, are you doing background checks? Are you doing these things? Now they're specific, saying this is what an insurance company can do. But no, there's not somebody coming to your church on Sunday morning, making sure that you have background checks, making sure you have 2 adults, making sure you have policies and procedures. Where enforcement is going to happen is through litigation. And a plaintiff's attorney, should something come up, the very first thing that they will do is they're going to say, okay, were you meeting the law in California? Were you doing these 3 items? So I think that's where the enforcement is going to be. And I would say that in one way, it's really reducing liability, because now it's giving us this benchmark. And this is the good thing. It's always been so vague about what it is that we need to do. And we've kind of had to create our own guidelines for ministries in California. But now they've said, do LiveScan, do training, have 2 adults. There's more to it than that. They've told us the 3 things that you need to do. So they've now given us those minimum standards. The problem with it is that if you don't do those things, it actually increases your personal liability, and it creates an opportunity for somebody to go to you for punitive damages, because there's a law on the books and you've ignored it, and you've disregarded it completely. And that's something that's not covered by insurance. That's meant to punish. And that's when the courts say, yes, your insurance company can pay out X amount of dollars, but we're going to also ask you to cut a check for punitive damages, because we're going to punish you for that. So, but no, there's not enforcement up front, but there is enforcement down the road. And it's not just talking about abuse in the church. We're not talking about a child being molested in a Sunday school classroom. And that's what you have to report. It's that you're aware that abuse happened of a child, or you're aware that neglect happened of a child. And it may have happened at school, it may have happened in a sports activity, it may have happened in their home, and you failed to report it. We're now having, there's more responsibility on those of us that are serving youth, but we have to go through this training. I'll tell you, I've got, on our website right now, it's got everything right there for you. It'd be more effective than having a committee go together. We put a lot of effort into it. We've had attorneys that have helped us and insurance companies that have helped us. And what I'd encourage you to do is get started on it and go through the model policy, go through the application process to go to get LiveScan. And then once you're partway there, send it to us. We'll have the attorneys review it for you. And again, it's no charge. It doesn't matter if you're insured with us or not. Brotherhood Mutual's made their their attorneys available to review this for you. And give it a shot and let's get started. And then then they'll give you recommendations on what to do next.
Just a question on pastors being mandated reporters as far as California is concerned. And we know in the Roman Catholic Church system that there is a sanctity of the confessional. What about for us then, if there is a child abuse report within the context of a confidential pastoral counseling session? What is the moral ethics? What is the pastoral ethics that's involved in that situation for us? Because if we report it, then no one will come to us for pastoral counseling anymore. I mean, I'd just like some kind of guidance or word as to this. And this may not be the right platform or venue, but you know, just asking that question out there.
There's something that we put together. I'm going to show you this link here real quick. We did a webinar on this a while ago because this was tough, because we hear about that clergy penitent privilege is what you're talking about. And there's clergy penitent privilege, and ministries have often said, well, you know, hey, I'm talking to a pastor, it's like talking to a doctor, and I've got privacy issues. I'm talking to a lawyer, I've got some protection there. That clergy penitent privilege is really specific on how you actually have that privilege. And so I think one of the really good resources that we put together is we had a webinar on this topic, and it's very nuanced. We had an attorney that's dealt with these lawsuits before, and we had a webinar on clergy privilege. And if you go to this webinar here, we had 2 attorneys and a consultant that discussed it. And I learned so much by being a part of this webinar and being the host of it a year or so ago that I'd encourage you to go through it, because it's, in order to have that privilege to begin with, the church actually has to go through some steps. So I'd encourage you to watch this and you'll understand it a little bit better. Does that help?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
This is Enrique from the Hispanic Baptist Church. We had about 400 people meeting in our church every Sunday. And all of us, majority of us, just speak Spanish. And they come from another country where this kind of law are not imposed, or maybe they are imposed, but they don't know. For that reason, somebody was asking at the very beginning if this will be in Spanish. Will be easier for our people to understand all these regulations if they are in Spanish. If there is any efforts by APCO-Flash or that is already a place to go and see this new law and what do we have to do in our churches. And then it's very important, even though we are in America where we should speak English, but they don't have time to learn English and they have to work hard. And then how to make easier for them.
Right now, because this law came into effect in January, and I was made aware of it in December. I've been the one in our office that's trying to really figure it out, because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a ton of bad information that, so I've been the one that's doing it, and my Espanol is muy mal. My wife is from Argentina, and she would love to have me speak Spanish at home. But no, I can't do it. We have people in our office that speak Spanish that are working on mastering this topic a little bit better. And I would say within 60 days, I'll have somebody that can do something similar to what we've done now, but in Spanish.
That would be great.
And the training will be available, but in Spanish. But with the questions that come up, I'll work with Solomon in our office. He's a good guy, but it's one of those where I need to come alongside him and assist him in it, because it's tricky. It's tricky. So we're working on it. Okay, Pastor Torres?
Thank you.
De nada.
Charlie.
Terrific.
Charlie, I have a question. This is Caesar.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for presenting this information. It is very helpful, and for giving us the resources. Going back to what Pastor Torres was sharing, what do we do in a situation where we have volunteers, hundreds of volunteers who are may not have the right to work documentation, and now we're going to require them to go through background checks and training? Where does the law stand before that? Because if you have someone who doesn't have the right to work documentation, they're faithful, diligent servants who serve but never went through the process, how do we hold them accountable, or how is the state going, or the state going to hold us accountable with this new law?
We want those people still to serve, even if somebody's, maybe they're undocumented, or maybe they're 17 years old. We can't do a background check on a minor. Remember, it says that we have to have 2 adults that have been screened and trained that are supervising youth. Well, we can't screen somebody that we can't do a background check on. And so they can still serve. However, they would not meet the 2 adult requirement. So you would need to have 2 folks that are where you're able to do a background check on them present. Plus you would have some other folks that might be helping out that haven't been screened. We have some guidance on that on the website at AB506, churchwest.com/AB506. So it's going to be challenging. It might be that you have larger groups of kids, and you might have 2 adults that have been screened and trained, and then you have more helpers that are working alongside them. But you're going to have to kind of work through it in each situation. Okay, I want to tell you, we're available to assist. We have it on the website, churchwest.com, AB506. We have our contact information there as well. If you have follow-up questions, I would encourage you to try and start going through this process. And when you need help, reach out. You know, we'll come alongside you best we can, but we can't. It's going to take each church doing it on their own.